Welcome to the last week of May. And it's Memorial Day weekend. There should, at some level, have a concern for the fallen who have given their lives for a cause. And I don't want to get too heavily into that because, well, a thankfulness that some have chosen, or maybe it was thrust upon them, to be the cannon fodder of war. But before I get too carried away with this last week of May, there were so many loose threads in the fabric of the celestial dance last week that I missed one. And this was on Friday the 22nd. And I'm going to bring it in here because it goes for another month. And this is, remember we talked about Venus being out of bounds from basically the beginning of May to into the 6th of June? Well, Mercury on Friday went out of bounds itself. And will be out of bounds until the 13th of June. Mercury moves so much faster anyway. We're in the season where Mercury is the ruler, Gemini season. And this experience of our thinking, our communication vehicle that Mercury represents on, quite a variety of different levels. You might say that in a way, if I were to choose in this moment for a mercurial image along the tapestry wavelength, it would be a coat of many colors, because it is Gemini, it is Mercury. And what exactly does an out of bounds planet mean? I've on multiple occasions explained the mechanics of what creates an out of bounds planet. But what does it mean? What happens when a planet is out of bounds to its energy? In one sense, because it's no longer really, readily accepting the dictates of rules and regulation as to what is appropriate. There's an unrestrained quality about it. It's almost like, wow, the shackles have been taken off. There's aspects of what it is that I can express that I couldn't before. Can you feel that unrestrained quality right there? However, this can lean, depending on how constrained one may normally feel by the rules and regulations, of an extreme nature that is, erupting. It's like, whoa, I have been cut loose. The dance of life is beckoning my participation to, to really let my hair down. Allow something, real dynamic to move through me that doesn't normally take place. This is out of bounds. And in that, you might almost sense, I'm no longer dependent on what the structures, the sun, what the rules from the hierarchical, regal nature of things says is appropriate, and at the same time Saturn's restrictions saying, you must stay within the lines, and the independent nature of being released beyond those restrictions. You can almost kind of sense a certain, shall we call it, wildness. Oh, the loose threads of this tapestry are, wanting to all speak out at once. This is out of bounds land, and this is Mercury. So the realm of how it is that we think and communicate and want to learn things, want to investigate processes, it's percolating on cylinders. There's a unpredictability quality that's, wanting to, possibly in a Uranian fashion. After all, Mercury was recently holding hands with Uranus, and the Sun also holding hands with Uranus. The revolutionary energy of life, it is percolating. You could almost say that there's a kind of a feral nature to what it is that transpires to the energy of a planet when it steps beyond the constraints of rules. Now, you may get all kinds of ideas about what feral means. I'm going to leave that up to you to make that determination. But this week, as we come into this celestial weave, whoops, there it is, Monday. Look what we have here. Mars at 5 degrees of Taurus. Pluto, 5 degrees of Aquarius, retrograde. But that's a square aspect. These two planets, Mars and Pluto, have a rather dynamic, or you might say strong, connectivity to this scorpionic signature. They're not in Scorpio, but they carry some of that, deep, penetrating, kind of, what shall we call it, a intermingling of passionate connectivity between folks that's always in the mix when either one of these is in play. Pluto's all about transformation, and not transformation at a light, meaningless kind of level, but deep, penetrating transformation where things are no longer the same once that transformation happens. In a square to Mars. Who is Mars? Well, Mars is not in its strongest condition right at the moment because it just went into Taurus, which is the opposite sign of Scorpio. So it's, in a sense, it's kind of like has this, what should we call it? It's almost like, this is not exactly correct, but it's almost like someone has taken and clamped Mars's legs into, picture if you will, a prisoner in a chain gang with the leg irons hooked on. So Mars is not able to run as freely as it might be, but it's still Mars. It can shake that chain that's holding it and probably cause some disruption all along that chain gang line. After all, it's still Mars. And being in a square aspect to Pluto, and that square is kind of, there's a discomfort to these energies at work because they're in signs that don't generally, go out of their way to get along with one another. We have an air sign up there, Aquarius, where Pluto is, taking the experience of the individual in the context of a group. This is the Aquarian side. And there's a level of transformation that is on the table. Mars is saying, take a chance. Be alive. Strike out. Instigate something. That is how Mars works in this, grating, intense, or tense aspect with that Pluto. And you might almost sense the potential for cage rattling to be transpiring in the group in an Aquarius fashion. Something might be trying to be invented that is so new that you can almost feel the discomfort, the disquieting nature of its ripple through the group energy, because it's so unique and so potent that we all know that we're going to need to change in order to really be able to grasp effectively what this alteration is asking us to participate in. This is a very powerful aspect, and it starts the week out for this last week of May. And this lasts for a couple of days. Very hard aspect, that hard square. But, when they speak oftentimes of aspects, they're talking about a range that goes, maybe 3 or 4 degrees on either side of the exact aspect. So this is a footprint that has a pretty substantial merit to it to pay attention to. We're in it already this weekend. And on Tuesday, a Mars day, the Sun moves into a trine with Pluto. That regal rulership nature of Gemini, of that solar signature of being in a position of authority, in a sign that has levels of curiosity, asking questions about everything, in trying to Pluto, who in the Aquarian archetypal dance probably you can almost feel the waves of energy moving through the Aquarian group format with questions about, who is in this position of authority with enough chutzpah to actually dictate what it is that we as a group need to function like. Yeah, it is a trine. These are both air sign elements. But lest we forget, Mercury, the ruler of that of that Gemini signature, is out of bounds. Unpredictability, wildness. I almost get like an Eris kind of energy that throws something out into the center of any particular mix that presents a challenge to the congregation that's gathered around as to who deserves or who is most functionally tuned into what it is that the Eris has thrown in there. There is a disruptive nature potential in what this Pluto, Mars, Sun, and Mercury out of bounds signature is vigorously stirring the cauldron of life and watching as what is it that's going to surface in this cauldron to be considered next. And more than likely, it's not going to be something, so overtly blendful, harmonious, easy to get along with. Oh, no, not. The things that are likely to appear on the surface of this cauldron will have a lot to do with what were the ingredients that actually were thrown into this cauldron that is being stirred by who? That are combining and recombining into different configurations, and from that Plutonic perspective, seeking a level of transformation into something that is so totally new it has not happened before. Is it going to be the most comfortable thing in the world? Well, maybe, but Mars square to Pluto, I sense the potential for a little hard edges of, like sandpaper against sandpaper rubbing together, saying things are going to need to be alterated here, and it's going to require a letting go of things that you may have considered, sacred to you. That at this time need to be reconsidered. That's just Monday and Tuesday this week. And, when I first looked at what I had written down for the consideration of what this week had in play, I had this. I thought, gee, there's hardly anything that is transpiring this week. Oh, yeah. I'm going to go back to the Sabian symbol for Pluto. I have used it before, but sometimes when we look at things a second or a third time, the things that come up are not the same as when we first glance across this. The symbol reads, a masked figure performs ritualistic acts in a mystery play. And I want you to feel very specifically Pluto as a connection to the Scorpio mysteries of life is what is in play here. The keynote, the individual's involvement in a long established pattern of activity aiming at the release of collective power. Power is another term for Pluto. Further, the great mysteries of the past were created by inspired seers and adepts for the purpose of transferring to a mentally conscious and humanly significant level of group operation. Can you feel the Aquarius in that? What in the lower kingdoms of life we call instincts, biological, and cosmic energies can thus be used to ensure that social processes do not lose touch with the deeper realities of planetary and universal life. Rituals are binding, and often the performers wear masks, for they do not act as human persons, but as focal points for the release of transpersonal energies. That's Pluto up there, asking us as a collective to not be so fixed. Yeah, Aquarius is a fixed sign, but to not be so fixed that we miss out on the potential for altering our trajectories in such fashion that something new can be awakened and transpire, a shift in the inventive quality of being incarnate as a soul being here on the planet now. That's, I could probably stop right here and say, meditate upon that for what this week keeps offering for us to ponder deeply. But, what other threads in this fabric of life are at play this week? See the moon over here? It's moving right along. And what it's going to do as we move through the week, we get to the weekend. Moon's in Scorpio here. As soon as the moon has crossed into this very earliest part of Sagittarius, it's out of bounds. See that? Out of bounds. As well as, Venus and Mercury both out of bounds as well. And on Saturday, the 30th, the moon is going to be forming opposite the sun. A new moon. time to, a full moon. And this is kind of like the second full moon of the month, the blue moon as they call it, because 2 full moons in a month. The second one becomes the blue moon. The first one was on May 1st. This is on May 30th, almost the very end of the month. And we're in the weekend. Full moons on the weekend can lead to what? Depends on how much of a lunar crazy energy you're willing to tap into. Remember our mask person with Pluto up there at 5 degrees of Aquarius forming anything? Well, this Sabian symbol for the full moon at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. Also, here's what it reads: a theatrical representation of a golden-haired goddess of opportunity. Think of this. The moon is full up there in the heavens. The image of the golden-haired goddess, brilliantly lit by this full moon on Saturday. The keynote: society's efforts at dramatizing the greatness of what it offers to the ambitious person. Further, civilization as a process demands the goading of individuals to spend their vital energies in the pursuit of achievements which, while fulfilling the individual's ambition and greed, nevertheless generate various forms of what we call progress. This sequence of symbols mainly refers to the drive for advancement along human, all too human, paths of growth. We see in it how socio-cultural forces operate by dramatizing and propaganda. The result is all too often a process of forced growth. Is there enough capacity within any of us to be able to restrain ourselves from what a societal cultural direction may be attempting to, squeeze us into very particularly molds of what it is that it requires in order for it to continue to move along a trajectory that has been set in motion for perhaps way too long? And the molds, the containers that it is attempting to squeeze us into are no longer as relevant to us as individuals, and probably to the collective as well, though the collective may not recognize it. But there are aspects of each of us as soul beings that are here to, expand the creative soul presence in such fashion that they probably, most likely, no longer will fit into a pre-planned, pre-molded version of what is required to move us along a societal trajectory that what? Is the version of a capitalistic, consumer-based experience on planet Earth sustainable in the long run, the way it's running right now? Or perhaps there's something that wants to be awakened within each of us at our soul level that has always been there, that sees options that are far more harmonious in the long run for what it is that we can provide as an exchange of energy with one another towards something brand new. So, I think that's enough of the astrology thing for now. But I chose an image of a erupting volcano creating the static energy of lightning that comes from, a violent upheaval of energy. Pluto, Mars square, as being something like an opportunity to shake us enough that we're willing to awaken out of that discomfort that the containers our culture has tried to squeeze us into do not fit. There are other dynamics for our purpose on planet Earth that extend well beyond, well within our hearts as to how we're meant to get along with one another. Not as warring participants, forever stuck in a competition to kill one another. Over what? Someone's dictates that are intent upon the separation of every one of us from everyone else? I don't think so. We actually came to this planet to discover the uniqueness that each of us represents as critical for developing an expansive version of what it is that we as soul beings came here on earth to accomplish. I'm going to leave that for the end of May. So, ciao for now. We got some energy this week that, it could wake us up. And, Mercury being out of bounds for this next cycle. Questions are likely to, arise that we may wonder where they came from. And Mercury's in Gemini, its home port. So, pay attention. Is this really a heart soul question that's arising in you? Or is it the trickster? You know, the trickster, it doesn't necessarily do things, in a, what should we call it, an evil fashion. It does it to wake us up to opportunities and options that, it takes a bit of shaking. It takes a little bit of that. Uranus recently arrived in Gemini. A revolution, a revolutionary kind of energy that is attempting to get our attention to things that we hadn't awakened to yet. Prometheus, the great awakener, Uranus in Gemini for the first time in 84 years, permanently until, 7 or 8 years from now, is going to be presenting opportunities for conscious awakening, to not be along lines that are stagnant and old. Ciao for now. Have a good week. Happy Memorial Weekend. And trust your heart and soul. They have answers that can't come from anywhere else. Ciao.